It begins not with a map, but with a whisper lost in the dense emerald breath of the Congo rainforest, a whisper that pulses not in the air, but in the blood. Deep in the heart of Africa, where river veins braid through ancient soil, something remarkable lies beneath the surface. It's not gold. It's not oil. It's something infinitely older, more powerful, and more intimate. It's DNA. And not just any DNA, but some of the most complex, diverse, and mysterious genetic code on Earth. For decades, the world's gaze turned elsewhere, to sleek labs in Boston, to silicon in San Francisco. But while science raced toward the future, a different kind of story, older than empire, deeper than databases, waited in the trees, in the bones, in the names sung through oral memory. And now, finally, the spotlight turns toward the Congo. Why does the Congolese genome matter? Because inside it are answers to questions we haven't even known how to ask. Who were we before nations? How do empires shape the body? What does it mean when diversity isn't just cultural, but biological? In the Democratic Republic of Congo, there are hundreds of languages, dozens of ethnic groups, and, as new research reveals, genetic variation that rivals or even surpasses that found across entire continents. This isn't just population diversity. It's genetic memory. Each allele, each mutation, carries the echo of migrations that began tens of thousands of years ago, through deserts, over mountains, across oceans of time. And yet, for all its depth, this diversity remained in the shadows, underfunded, under-researched, undervalued. The DNA of the Congolese didn't fit neatly into colonial narratives or Western frameworks, so it was quietly ignored. But not anymore. Today, scientists are unearthing a truth long buried under politics and poverty. The Congolese genome is not just local, it's global. It contains ancient lineages that help us understand how humans adapted to disease, how we dispersed across the earth, and how resilience itself is etched into our code. And it isn't just about survival. It's about identity. It's about pride. It's about rewriting a story that was told about Congo without Congo. Because when we study this DNA with respect, when we listen instead of extract, we don't just get data. We get history, humanity, and hope. A kingdom's rise, a mutation's shadow, a seed's inheritance. These aren't isolated tales. They're strands of a genetic epic, and Congo is its central character. The whisper has turned into a voice, and now the world is listening. Imagine this. A single drop of blood from the Congo can tell more about human history than 100 books. One person's DNA, born in the depths of Central Africa, holds more genetic variation than entire populations of Europe or Asia. That's not poetry. That's biology. When scientists first mapped the human genome, they expected to find complexity everywhere. But what they didn't expect was the center of that complexity. The spotlight didn't land in Paris or New York. It didn't rest on imperial capitals or laboratory titans. Instead, the trail of diversity, of deep time and ancient inheritance, led them back to the Congo. The Congo Basin is more than a geographical marvel. It's a genetic arc, a living archive of the full spectrum of human possibility. Across its jungles, savannas, riverbanks, and highlands live hundreds of ethnic groups, each with linguistic and cultural tapestries as vivid as their DNA. But it's what's hidden under the skin, deep in the double helix, that left scientists stunned. A single village in the Democratic Republic of Congo might contain more allelic variation than is found in all of Scandinavia. Families carry rare genetic lineages not seen anywhere else on Earth, markers that reach back to our earliest human ancestors. These aren't outliers. They are the genetic norm in this region. This makes Congolese DNA a priceless key for understanding who we are as a species, how we evolved, how we survived epidemics, how we adapted to shifting climates and continents. And yet, for so long, these keys were left unturned, not because they weren't valuable, but because they were African. There's a brutal irony here. The continent that gave birth to all humanity has been the last to be studied on its own terms. But that is changing and fast. Thanks to revolutionary advances in genomic sequencing and a new wave of African-led science, we now know what should have been obvious all along. The deeper the roots, the richer the story. And nowhere are the roots deeper than in Congo. But this isn't just about statistics or academic discovery. There's something profoundly human about it. Because with every newly sequenced genome, Congolese people are reclaiming their narrative, not just as subjects of history, but as authors of evolution. Their DNA doesn't whisper submission. It roars survival. This is not diversity as decoration. It is diversity as foundation. A foundation that supports every health breakthrough, every ancestral map, every answer we're still chasing in biology today. So next time someone speaks of ancient bloodlines or genetic legacies, remember this. They all lead back to a place the world tried to forget, but the genes remembered. Power doesn't just shape borders. It shapes blood. Centuries before colonial maps carved up Africa, a political experiment was unfolding deep in the forested heart of what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo, a kingdom unlike its neighbors, not born from conquest, but from centralization, innovation, and unity. It was called the Kuba Kingdom, and its influence was more than cultural or architectural. It reached into the genome. The Kuba did something rare for their time. They built a network of communities under one organized political system. Dozens of ethnic groups, previously isolated, began to move, to marry, to mix. Trade routes expanded. Ideas spread. And with them, so did DNA. Today, geneticists can still trace the ripple effect of this unification. The descendants of the Kuba show distinct signatures of admixture, evidence of migration and blending that stands apart from their neighbors. Their genomes are more complex, more interwoven, more reflective of a kingdom that rewrote social boundaries. This isn't myth. It's encoded history. You can see it in the increased heterozygosity, the presence of diverse alleles passed down from interlinked bloodlines. You can see it in rare haplotypes, preserved only in this region, likely carried through generations by a society that prioritized connectivity. The Kuba story defies the tired narrative of static African villages frozen in time. They were dynamic, strategic. They harnessed power not through war, but through systems that unknowingly engineered a new genetic future. And yet, what's astonishing is not just what they built, but how their legacy lives on in the very cells of their descendants. The architecture of their society is echoed in the architecture of the genome. What does it mean when a political structure leaves an imprint in your DNA? It means that history isn't only written in stone or parchment. Sometimes, it's carried quietly in mitochondria, passed from mother to child, from generation to generation, long after kings fall and palaces crumble. The Kuba Kingdom may no longer stand in visible walls, but it remains alive in blood. And as researchers map this legacy, strand by strand, a new picture of African statehood is emerging. One that isn't about erasure or domination, but about synthesis, about building bridges through biology. So when we talk about African history, let's not stop at what was carved or sung. Let's listen to what was inherited. In a country where the sun reigns with unrelenting power, there are children born who cannot hide from its gaze. Their skin is pale, their eyes sensitive, their hair light against the deep tones of their heritage. In Congo, they are called albinos, but beneath the surface, they are so much more. They carry a mutation, a microscopic alteration in the OCA2 gene that changes the way the body makes melanin, a deletion of just 2.7 kilobases. Tiny, precise, and yet powerful enough to shift the way the world sees you and how you see the world. This mutation isn't just a random glitch. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's a signature, passed silently through generations. In one groundbreaking study, over 8 in 10 families with oculocutaneous albinism carried this same genetic deletion. That level of concentration is almost unheard of. It's as if the gene found a hidden corridor in the population and flourished. But why? Why here? Scientists are still untangling that mystery. Some suggest it could be a founder effect, the result of a single ancestor whose altered gene spread widely through isolated or tightly connected communities. Others wonder if there's a deeper evolutionary story, one tied to survival under ancient pressures we no longer fully understand. What we do know is this. This isn't just a mutation. It's a mirror, reflecting how our genetic past intersects with our social present. In Congolese society, albinism is surrounded by myth, fear, misunderstanding. In some places, Children with albinism are hidden. In others, hunted. But science tells a different story. It tells of a shared inheritance, one that calls not for fear, but for understanding and protection. And now, for the first time, this genetic insight is becoming a tool. Doctors in Congo can offer targeted genetic counseling, not just based on symptoms, but on actual DNA. Families who once had no answers are now given clarity, knowledge, power. This is the quiet revolution of genomics. Not only mapping what's wrong, but explaining why, and giving families a voice in their own genetic future. Because this isn't just about melanin. It's about identity, about being seen for who you are, not just how you appear. And in the flicker of this mutation, in its rare, fragile light, is a deeper truth, that even our perceived vulnerabilities are part of a broader human code, a code that binds us, illuminates us, and reminds us that what makes us different may also be what makes us extraordinary. In the shadowed silence of Congo's forests, something extraordinary is growing. Not a secret, not a monument, but a tree. To most of the world, it's just coffee, bitter, black, and brewed by routine. But in Congo, the Robusta coffee plant is more than a crop. It's a genetic archive, a living, breathing map of heritage, memory, and survival. For decades, the Inera coffee collection in Yangambi sat quietly. Rows of coffee shrubs stretched across the land, each one seemingly identical to the next. But the truth was hidden in their leaves. Beneath the bark and the cells was a story no label could tell. The collection had become a maze of lost names and misrecorded histories. Hundreds of plants, their identities blurred by war, neglect, and time. And then came the scientists, armed not with pruning shears, but with sequencers. They began to unlock what had been buried. Using cutting-edge genomic tools, genotyping by sequencing, and a high-resolution method called HiPlex, researchers cracked open the genetic code of 730 coffee plants. What they found wasn't chaos. It was lineage. They identified 263 unique genetic fingerprints, each one distinct, some wild, some hybrid, some directly linked to ancient cultivars bred nearly a century ago. Among them were long-lost strains like Lula, elite lines once distributed across continents, now barely surviving in tangled plots. But the real revelation? This wasn't just about agriculture. This was ancestry. The same kind of genetic detective work used in human population studies was now applied to plants. And the parallels were uncanny. Like people, these coffee shrubs had parents, offspring, and entire family trees. Some were born from deliberate breeding. Others were shaped by open pollination, natural unions between wild and cultivated lineages. In many cases, the plants we thought were clones turned out to be strangers. And those marked as strangers? Sometimes they were family. The DNA told the truth. Researchers could even trace which coffee genotypes had been favored, the founding ancestors of the Yangambi plantation. Just like human history, a few dominant lines had spread widely, shaping the genetics of everything that followed. But why does it matter? Because this coffee isn't just about taste. It's about resistance to disease, to pests, to climate change. The genetic secrets inside these shrubs could be the key to protecting coffee worldwide. And yet, most of this diversity was unknown, unlabeled, almost lost. Until now. Congo's coffee, like its people, carries a resilient genome, shaped by time, scarred by history, but unbroken. The Inera collection isn't just being preserved. It's being revived, documented, protected. And as scientists sift through chloroplasts and alleles, they're not just cataloging crops. They're recovering a legacy. There was a time when Congolese genetics stood at the edge of greatness, not as a dream, but as a reality in motion. In the 1960s, at a university in Kinshasa, a flame was lit. Not political, not ideological, but biological. Professor Herman van den Berg helped establish one of Africa's first major genetic centers, a beacon of science in a land too often defined by struggle. But history, as it often does in Congo, had other plans. Decades of conflict, neglect, and collapse swept away that fragile foundation. Laboratories emptied. Projects died mid-sentence. The language of DNA was silenced by the louder noise of survival. For years, the legacy of that early work faded, almost forgotten. And yet, some embers never die. In recent years, something unexpected began to stir. Scientists, not from abroad, but from Congo itself, began returning home. One of them was Professor Prosper Lukusa, a pioneer of Congolese medical genetics. He didn't come back for nostalgia. He came to rebuild. And he wasn't alone. Alongside local and international allies, a movement reignited. Classrooms opened again. Young minds began learning the code of life. And then, quietly but powerfully, the Congolese Society for Human Genetics was born. This wasn't just another academic body. It was a declaration. Congo will no longer be studied from a distance. It will study itself. Today, Congolese researchers are mapping genomes, tracing inheritance patterns, and offering real-world services that were once unimaginable. Families affected by rare disorders are no longer dismissed as curiosities. They're given answers, diagnoses, and paths forward. But this revival is more than clinical. It's cultural. For generations, identity in Congo was rooted in clan, language, and place. Now, for the first time, it also includes chromosomes. The double helix is becoming part of the national story, not replacing tradition, but expanding it. And perhaps most powerfully, this revival is homegrown. These are not borrowed programs or temporary aid missions. This is Congolese knowledge, built by Congolese hands, for Congolese futures. The stakes are immense. This isn't just about health. It's about sovereignty. Because in a world where genomic data is currency, controlling your own DNA means controlling your narrative. In Kinshasa and Lubumbashi, in field clinics and forest outposts, the once-lost dream is now alive again. The spark that flickered in the 60s has become a fire. And the legacy, it's not just being preserved. It's being rewritten, strand by strand, study by study, generation by generation. There's a paradox at the heart of science. The search for universal truths almost always begins in the same places: wealthy labs, powerful nations, polished institutions. But sometimes, those truths lie far from the spotlight. Sometimes, the key to understanding everyone is hidden in a place the world tried to ignore. That place is the Congo. To most of the world, Congo's story is painted in the colors of conflict, poverty, and exploitation. But inside the cells of its people, in the twisted strands of DNA passed down across millennia, lies a story that doesn't just matter to Central Africa. It matters to all of us. Because the diversity inside Congolese genomes isn't just an African curiosity. It's a global necessity. It helps scientists decode how humans evolved to resist disease, how certain genes protected us from ancient plagues, how our species adapted to sunlight, altitude, and diet. Without this data, our picture of humanity is incomplete. Yet despite that, only a fraction of global genomic studies include African populations. The very continent that birthed our species remains underrepresented in the science meant to explain us. That's not just a missed opportunity. It's a scientific blind spot. In Congo, researchers have uncovered genetic variants that reshape our understanding of common conditions, from diabetes to anemia, from infectious diseases to inherited traits. These aren't anomalies. They're essential pieces of the human puzzle. And in an age where precision medicine is rising, where treatments are tailored to your genome, leaving out Congolese data doesn't just delay discovery. It deepens inequality. It risks building a medical future that doesn't fit everyone. But there's a deeper layer to this lesson. Congo's genetic story isn't just about biology. It's about ownership. For centuries, its people were mined like minerals, their labor, their bodies, even their histories extracted for profit. Genomic data must not become the next resource stolen without consent. That's why today's Congolese scientists aren't just collecting DNA. They're building ethical frameworks. They're fighting for data sovereignty, for community-led research, for knowledge that uplifts instead of exploits. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson of all. True science, the kind that serves humanity, doesn't extract. It collaborates. It listens. It shares power. The genes of the Congolese people are not relics. They are revelations. They don't need to be saved. They need to be respected. Because when we finally center the Congo in the human story, we don't just see Africa more clearly. We see ourselves. If your blood could speak, would you recognize its voice? Would it tell you the story of your family, or the story of 1,000 strangers whose footsteps once crossed the same soil? Would it whisper lullabies in forgotten tongues? Or would it scream with the memories of what history tried to erase? In the Congo, blood speaks volumes, not through words, but through code, a molecular language written in nucleotides, passed down quietly through generations, a language that predates nations, predates writing, predates even memory itself. And for those willing to listen, it says something profound. That identity isn't just a flag or a name. It's a pattern, shaped by migration, molded by survival, and sharpened by time. The strands of DNA that wind through the Congolese people are not linear. They are layered, complicated, ancient, a mosaic forged through centuries of movement, resistance, adaptation, and rebirth. Every genetic variant is a timestamp. Every mutation, a mark of some forgotten challenge overcome. But this is not just poetic biology. It's a scientific revelation, because when you trace these strands long enough, they begin to connect. Across tribes, across borders, across oceans. Suddenly, the map isn't just local, it's planetary. You begin to see that the blood in your veins may share an ancestor with someone who once stood by the banks of the Congo River. That's not a theory. That's genetics. So when we talk about Congolese DNA, we're not just talking about a single people. We're talking about a root system, one that extends beneath the surface of every population on Earth, whether they know it or not. And yet, most people have never heard this story. Not because it's hidden, but because it's been silenced. Congo has always been rich, not just in minerals or forests or music, but in meaning. It has held, in its very bodies, the chapters of a human saga we're only beginning to understand. And now, with every genome sequenced, we're turning those silent pages. So ask yourself, what parts of your ancestry still remain unspoken? What echoes from your lineage haven't yet reached your ears? Because if your blood could speak, it might say things that textbooks never told you. It might carry memories of kingdoms, migrations, and resilience. It might sing a song that started in the Congo and somehow still lives in you. You just haven't heard it yet.